Welcome, everyone. So excited to present this webinar today. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Donna Shugart Bethune, and I am the Executive Director for the IAPC. And I'm just really thrilled that we have joining us today a wonderful panel to provide some insight as well as forward looking discussion regarding pet water cremation. So, this is our panelists today, our leaders and innovators in the field. And I'm just really excited to be able to offer this opportunity for everyone to hear some real truths and insight from experts in the field. So, first, I'd like to introduce our panelists. We have with us today Courtney de Craen with Paws and Grace out of San Diego, California. We have Shannon Doretti with Petrichor Aquamation in Boston, Massachusetts. Philip Flores Jr. with Pet Cremation by Water out of Chicago, Illinois. And Matthew Mansour with Crossings out of Phoenix, Arizona. So before I actually turn this over to Courtney, I will turn on the chat feature. So please feel free to ask your questions within the chat feature, and we'll address those after each panelist is completed with their presentation. So at this time, I will turn it over to Courtney.
Thank you so much, Donna. Hi, everyone. My name is Courtney de Craen. I am from Paws and Grace in San Diego, California. We've been doing home euthanasia in Southern California since 2007, and we opened our own water cremation facility in 2020. So I'm going to start by giving everybody a brief overview of the definitions and terminology that are used in this industry. We hear the word water cremation. That's often the most consumer-friendly term, but you will also hear the words aquamation, flameless cremation, green cremation, biocremation, and alkaline hydrolysis. They all mean the same things. The term alkaline hydrolysis is the scientific term for the process. So you might see that in different bills and legislature that comes through, or in articles as well include that. Also, the term aquamation is what BioResponse has trademarked, and that's the process that they use. But you're going to hear all of those used simultaneously throughout the conversation and as we discuss this process. So how does the process work? There are uh, the stainless steel machine that you can see on the bottom left here is what a PET 550 looks like. That machine in particular has two of these cradles that you can see, which are the perforation of the baskets that you can see kind of in the middle here. It has two of these baskets or cradles that go into it. And then depending on the load, whether it's communal or individual, it may be divided up by solid stainless steel sheets that go in between each pet or dividers. And then once they're full, the lid of the cradle gets placed on, and we put about 5% either potassium hydroxide or sodium hydroxide is added to the machine. Both of those chemicals are considered alkali. That's the alkaline part of alkali hydrolysis. And for those of you who slept like through high school chemistry like I did, that means it is high on the pH scale. So it's the opposite end of an acid, the opposite pH scale of an acid, and it can still, though, dissolve and create that chemical reaction that is needed for that process. Once the chemical's added, the machine is closed and it fills up with warm water and then is heated until about 200 degrees and gently circulated. Over the course of about 18 hours, those tissues get broken down and they leave behind only the bone fragments like you see in those bottom middle pictures there. And the machine is then drained at the end of the process. Usually the water's going back into either a tank or it's going back into the sewer. And the bones are scooped out of the machine and then they're put onto trays or drying racks like you see at the top right of the picture. They can be put on these baking trays and used with a dehumidifier, or they can be put into more of a commercial grade oven, which very much speeds the process up. And then once the bones are dried, they're put into a cremulator, just like flame cremation, and they're finally returned to the family in an urn. So let's discuss flame cremation, burial, and water cremation. When it comes down to it, about 90% of our families are choosing some form of cremation, and the other 10% are choosing burial. There's pros and cons to each of these options. And burial is often the most cost effective, especially if the family's doing it on their own land. Most of the conversations that I have with owners is related to the property itself. Is it legal where they're located? Are there jurisdictions in their area that prevent that? Are we going to be burying a pet near a water table that has euthanasia drugs in it? There's a lot of different things to consider when it comes to burial. I think one of the most prevalent is, if you bury Fluffy at home, are you okay leaving Fluffy there if and when your family moves? But we have a lot of those conversations because we offer the home euthanasia side of things that most crematory owners probably aren't having when it comes to burial alternatives. Um, Water cremation is becoming an increasingly popular eco friendly alternative. And one of the biggest advantages is that minimal impact to the environment. It uses significantly less energy than flame cremation and produces no harmful emissions like carbon dioxide. It's also just a gentler process. As you saw in that initial slide, and you can see the spine, you can see the teeth. It is very gentle to the pet itself. And then there's the sterile liquid byproduct from the machine that's often returned into the ecosystem, either via the sewer or land applied as fertilizer. And then that remaining bone is processed and returned as ash. But of course, like anything, there are some drawbacks. Uh, our return process, it takes longer. It takes 18 hours to cremate. It takes 2 to 3 days to dry the bones. We're telling people 2 to 3 weeks for a return process, whereas I think most flame um, crematories would be horrified at a 2 to 3 week return length. It's usually, 24 to 48 hours is what is recommended. And so based on the families that can be important for them. Um, it also hasn't been approved everywhere in the world, and even in the United States, there's some places where, while it is legal currently in every state, there are some states that are starting to put more legislature and regulations into their statewide language to make sure that it's being done correctly and is really bringing awareness to it. And then it can be more expensive. Again, depending on the regions you're in, some places water cremation is offered at a higher expense than flame. And then there's also hesitancy. Not every consumer understands water cremation. It's one of my favorite icebreakers if you ever get into an Uber to ask somebody, do you know what water cremation is? And 99% of the time, they have no idea. So there's definitely a level of education that is required when it comes to water cremation. But as awareness grows, it's being accepted, and we personally find owners that seek us out because they want the implant plants or the metal back from a pet. They want more ash. They prefer the color of the ash that is returned, or they just in particular really want that gentle, eco-friendly cremation option. So, speaking of the environmental benefits, this is one of the biggest advantages of water cremation. It's a highly sustainable alternative. We're not using fossil fuels. We're using 90% less energy than flame cremation. It's emitting no harmful greenhouse gases or toxins. And because it's relying on that water based solution and natural chemical reaction, it's mimicking natural decomposition without polluting the air or the soil. It also isn't requiring caskets or funeral cemetery space. So, compared to burial as well, it's often considered one of the greenest aftercare options available for pets. If you look at this slide, it's just showing you, this is per pet. We're doing multiple pets in the machine at a time, so less than 1 pound of CO2 per pet with a water cremation compared to 20 to 200 pounds of CO2 per pet with a fire cremation. And those numbers really add up, especially when you're dealing with larger pets. Makes a huge difference. So the science behind it, this uses four components. Water, of course. Uh, Depending on the size of the machine, one cycle is about 2 to 500 gallons of water, which is what a family of four uses a day. So we're not talking about an enormous volume of water in these machines. And that's per cycle. Each cycle could do anywhere from 2 to 20 plus pets in one cycle. The second is temperature. The machine heats up to around 200 degrees, which, while it's getting to 200 degrees over a longer period of time, it's staying there, which uses less energy than compared to like a flame incinerator would do. Third is agitation. Many people, when they think of um, that motor on the machine, they envision there's gonna be like a whirlpool or a washing machine going around inside of the machine. It's not. It's uses that motor almost creates like a gentle vibration, and what that does is it speeds up the molecules in the machine, so they're bumping into each other more quickly, and it's just increasing the rate of decomposition. And then finally, that alkali we talked about, high pH, increases again the speed of natural decomposition, and the result of all of those things together is what the body would undergo in the soil over decades and decades being buried is what happens in less than a day in this process. So, legal status and adoption. It is currently widely permitted and practiced across the United States. As of now, it is legal in all 50 states. Pet cremation, water cremation, is legal in all 50 states. Um, we are finding a lot of vet clinics, pet crematories, cemeteries are starting to offer this service, and it's really increasing in that demand with environmentally friendly options. Across the globe, it's legal and offered in multiple provinces in Canada, as well as many large cities in Australia. um, we're finding different places in Europe that it is becoming legal slowly, but it is depending on the type of machine and the regulations in every country. And honestly, sometimes even specific regions or cities can vary throughout the United States and other countries across the globe. But we are finding the funeral industry is adapting quickly, trying to adapt quickly, and more providers are offering water cremation, especially those that are focused on that eco-friendly, sustainable angle. And even celebrities like Desmond Tutu chose water cremation for their final rites, which helped increase public awareness of it. So that wraps up my background on water cremation. I hope I gave you a clear understanding of what water cremation is and how it works, and why it's being called the future of eco-conscious aftercare. And if you have any questions or comments, please drop them in the chat.
Great. Thank you so much, Courtney. That was wonderful. Great information. We do have a question that came up. Scott is inquiring about terminology. He said that they tested various terms with consumers regarding terminology, and aquamation was the preferred term. I do think we need to maybe address that, Courtney, and I'll allow you to expand on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I agree with you, Scott. Aquamation is the term that I use. We use the word aquamation, aquamators. There's various terms of that, and that term is trademarked by BioResponse. So unless you have purchased a machine from BioResponse, you can't really be using that term, which I think is where, as more people come into the industry and different manufacturers, we are trying to be inclusive of all of those, and using the term water cremation is often the more consumer friendly term, especially if you don't have a bioresponse machine. But there are plenty of companies out there that do have bioresponse machines, and so therefore aquamation is even in the name of their company. So that's kind of the difference with those.
Yeah, it's so true. And Hannah with BioResponse did confirm that. So they do have the name trademarked, and Courtney is 100% correct. And I would say, in with that, we do use the terminology water cremation as far as a standard terminology within IPC. So great question, Scott. All right. Well, at this time, we'll turn this over to Shannon for her presentation.
Awesome. Thank you, Donna. Hi, I'm Shannon Doretti. I'm co-owner with my husband with Petrichor Aquamation. And I'm going to talk a little bit about from the perspective of just starting out. So if we can go to the first slide. Talking a little bit about misconceptions among pet families and veterinarians. I have the top three listed here. The first one, probably not going to go into too much detail about because we all experience this. This is probably one of the biggest questions we get. How do I know that these are my pet companions' remains? And ultimately, we all have our own tracking systems. We personally use a physical and digital tracking system so that we know every stage of the process where somebody's pet companion is in that process. And that does give peace of mind to many families that are inquiring. The next two are really specific to aquamation or water cremation. There's a myth out there that the liquid left behind or the effluent is somehow harmful. This couldn't be further from the truth. The liquid left behind or the effluent is actually sterile. It is free of DNA, RNA, pathogen, and even for veterinary providers, they're happy to learn that the euthanasia agents and chemotherapy drugs are also broken down and neutralized in this process. So it does provide comfort to know that this is a clean and safe and environmentally reasonable and responsible way to discharge the effluent. Lastly, is water cremation disrespectful as a method of disposition? This one's a little tougher to tackle. Sometimes people feel unsure about water cremation because they don't know enough about it and they're unsure of whether it aligns with their spiritual, religious, or cultural beliefs. And how I respond to those questions is really just to break down the um, the true understanding of what this process does. It mimics exactly what would happen if you were to lay a body to rest in the soil. So we're just accelerating Mother Nature. We're working with Mother Nature, not against it. So a lot of times that is an answer that really does provide comfort to those that are trying to understand the process and whether or not it aligns with them. So, moving on to regulatory hurdles, what to expect and how to stay sane. Speaking from experience, I really wish I had had a rubric when I started this whole process because there's a lot of layers involved in understanding what regulatory hurdles or just expectations you need to be aware of in this process, whether you're starting out as a standalone or whether this is an you're adding a line of business with water cremation. So, in speaking about zoning, understanding what zoning is in your area is going to be incredibly important. Whether it's retail, mixed use, industrial. The problem is that alkaline hydrolysis is still fairly new, and you may run into people, whether it's commercial real estate agents or town officials, even not knowing how to classify aquamation. And a lot of times they may not even want to help you figure it out. So, be prepared for a little bit of red tape. But and some creative conversations, but be patient, be persistent, and lean into the education that will help you understand where you'll land. For us, we landed in an industrial space working with a very large property management group. The other regulation that you need to be aware of is the water testing. Testing for pH, as Courtney talked about, pH is incredibly important to understand the pH of our business, of the effluent as a result of the alkaline hydrolysis process. And there will be testing at definitely the state level, but even at the city level and potentially even at the property management level. We experienced that in Woburn at the property management level and slash city level. And this was due to a real concern that Woburn had back in the day in the 80s. Fun fact, there was a industrial leak that unfortunately was related to a number of cases of childhood leukemia in the town. And what they realized after a 7-year court battle is that they needed to put far more stringent and strict regulations in place that companies and industries in the area had to adhere to. So, why am I telling you this? Ultimately, if Woburn has these very strong and strict regulations, as they should, they still welcomed petrichor into the community. And this is just a testament to the fact that this process is clean and safe. So it felt good to kind of know that we even upheld against a very strong regulation within the city of Woburn. So moving on to cost and operational challenges. So there are a lot of upfront costs when starting a business. Everybody could probably agree upon that. The biggest upfront cost for aquamation is, yes, the machine. That is your biggest investment. However, don't neglect any of your supporting equipment. Considering plumbing and electrical, I'll come back to that. And making sure that your space is scalable. And also the spaghetti model efficiency, which I'll talk a little bit about. And then, of course, adapting to your new job as a chemist. So, talking a little bit about the plumbing and electrical costs, this is something that we didn't anticipate initially, but we highly recommend getting your team together ahead of time while you're in the process of outfitting your new space or building out your new space. Finding plumbers and electricians that understand this process could be a little bit more challenging. Not because the machine is difficult to set up, but because it's new. And so finding people that you trust to make sure that you are researching those options is going to be really important. In terms of scalability, um, think big. Think a little bit more longer term than you think you normally would. I think we were smart in making sure that we could think about the longer term, and we actually plumbed out our space to add another machine. It's not necessarily in our business plan for another couple years. However, we might be accelerating that. So making sure you can't undo that work. So making sure that you are scalable. And of course, in that scalability, you have to mention technology. My husband and I were incredibly adamant about making sure that wherever we could leverage technology in our favor to help our scalability and growth efforts. So the spaghetti model efficiency, this is something near and dear because we're going through it right now. The spaghetti model efficiency is really just the analogy of how you are set up for your process flow. Right now, our process flow looks like cooked spaghetti. Everything's crisscrossing and intermingled, and we have a lot of zigzagging across our space. So, taking that apart and really understanding how many steps you're taking and where you're going to accomplish each stage of the journey is going to be really important. It saves with time, it saves with potential safety risks, and increases efficiency. So, making sure that you are taking some time to, again, figure out how you're growing within that space and how your flow will operate as you get larger. And lastly, as Courtney talked a little bit about the chemistry and what's involved, you really are going to become a little bit of an amateur chemist when you're first starting out because every facility is going to have a unique recipe based on their water composition, which chemicals they're using, any degreasers they're using, time and temperature. And while definitely interacting with other folks that have a water cremation business is helpful, however, there will be uniqueness even in your own personal facility just based on those factors. And moving on to public awareness and educational gaps, I could pretty much stop here by saying there's very little public awareness and there's a lot to fill in the educational gap because alkaline hydrolysis is still a relatively unknown process. So I'll speak to a little bit about how we decided to get out in front of the public. As well as our vet partners, we took a very traditional three-pronged marketing strategy approach, whereby we had physical marketing that we would bring to our local veterinarians, and that included our keepsake memorial packaging, samples to give out. Our packaging is a little unique, and so we really wanted to showcase that. We created some custom postcards to send out to all veterinarians within a 30-mile radius. It's direct mail, it's old school, but it was quite effective. And we created family-friendly brochures that actually speak to the process, but with clear, compassionate language, that explained how aquamation works, as well as what they could expect from Petrichor. And then we had a digital marketing strategy, that consisted of our website, our social media presence, and the biggest thing was the Google business listing. This is something we didn't anticipate. We spent a lot of time on our website. Our website's really great. I really am proud of it. But honestly, what drove a lot of our business was our Google business listing. So making sure you have it very well propped up, you have a lot of comprehensive information there, and that it's relevant. And with your positive reviews are listed there because that ends up creating good algorithm mojo, and that's what's really going to drive your business. And last but not least, we had a soft leads through service. Um, this is probably one of our most effective strategies, even though we didn't know it at the time, but we offered a free delivery of keepsake and remains back to veterinarians through our mobile euthanasia doctors. So this was a free service so that we could have an opportunity to go into the clinics that had patients who utilized our services, and this was our soft, warm opener instead of being too salesy and bothering the clinic staff when they're so busy. So this ended up being a really incredible way for us to build relationships within the community and get the word of mouth out there. So that's it for me. I'll turn it back over to Donna.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shannon. Great, great information. That was wonderful. Don't forget to put your questions in the web chat. And as we go through the process, we'll continue to answer those questions. So at this time, I will go ahead and turn it over to Philip.
Thank you, Donna. Hi, everybody. My name is Philip Flores, and I'm with Pet Cremation by Water. We're located in Arlington Heights, Illinois. We are a suburb of the Chicagoland area. My core focus during this panel conversation is going to be on best practices and solutions. Let's go ahead and kick it off. So let's talk about how to educate pet owners on water cremation. How do we turn curiosity into competence? Lead with empathy, not with service. Start every conversation with the pet story, not the process facts. Transition into the why, gentler on the planet and on breathe, or the how it's done. Don't just tell, show. Offer a short facility walkthrough. This could be by way of a video. This could be a virtual tour. Transparency certainly helps us build some trust. Keep a clear glass vial of the water cremated remain bone mineral on your front table. This will help with myth busting. When families see the end result, they feel a lot better about the process. Be sure to use their language. Blameless. Gentle water cremation process. 90% lower carbon paw print. Notice I said paw print, not carbon paw print or footprint. It resonates better than the chemical jargon that typically gets utilized in our space when we're uncomfortable. Provide your clinics, your B2C customers with a tear off pad that answers three important questions. What's the cost, the environmental impact, and the timeline? When we're in front of these customers, whether it's hosting a quarterly CE credit and are stopping in to visit to refresh their memory that we're there as an option for families, that will help instill trust because people work with people they like. Own your digital moment. Create a short-term video under 60 seconds. Explains what happens to my pet. A message like that tends to outperform standard text messages 4-to-1 on engagement. Add an interactive cost and carbon calculator to your site. Average dwelling time triples when owners play with sliders. Next, I want to focus on navigating the legal and the regulatory requirements. I'm not going to speak to what my peer panels have discussed so far, but I want to talk about how we can keep our boots clean and keep our inbox nice and calm. We want to make sure we understand the rural layers. So what do I mean by that? Local zoning and fire codes. Where do I place my tank? How do I mitigate noise? How do I ensure that I've got great curb appeals so that people can come up? State agriculture and veterinary boards for dead animal handling. This is not something that necessarily happens in all geography, but it does happen in certain communities, and it's important to be aware of them so you can get past the hurdles, so you can become operational. Thirdly, wastewater district for effluent, pH, and temperature discharge limits. Make sure you understand what those requirements are so you can speak as a professional, a well-known advisor in the space. Make sure you develop brand new friends. Two friends that come to mind for me is the municipal wastewater engineers. Invite them out to tour your facility so they can see what you have. Secondly, make sure that the state board environmental quality group is aware of what you're doing and make sure that they know that you partner with third-party lab data that comes from CANA, the Cremation Association of North America, and or IAOPCC, this group, providing research upfront. Documentation habits. Consider maintaining a single page so that when your customers come to your facility, they can see what is your cheat sheet for permits, renewal dates, and emergency contracts. Photograph every aspect of pictures that you have of your facility. Pictures speak 1,000 words, especially when it comes to compliance and sending information via email message. Monitor the map. Make sure you understand what's taking place in all 50 states. Um, Different municipalities have different requirements for pH, temperature discharge caps. Make sure that you bookmark your sewer district's FOG group. FOG stands for Fats, Oils, and Grease Ordinance. That can be located at aaha.com. And then, of course, the ace in the hole, this group, which is IAOPCC. It's an accreditation that offers and helps cover chain of custody, ID protocols, and emphasizes to regulators that you have an external checklist and group that you partner with. Again, IAOPCC. All right, next topic, effective business models for pet crematories. So I call this my bolt-on model, retrofitting an existing flame facility. So some of us out here are currently dealing with flame, right? We're considering dipping our toe in. How do we go ahead and do this? Do we give customers an offering? Do we benefit from going direct to customers and offering them this hand folding experience? I want to make sure that we're crystal clear. Water cremation and flame cremation are obviously vastly different. You can do a lot more pets and cremate, operate a business. Think about, revenue flow. You're going to get a lot of volume that comes through flame versus, we are a little bit more labor intensive on the water cremation side, right? Um, I call it two different margin models, and I probably shouldn't say that right now to this audience, but you can do things quick and fast. You can do it slow and gentle, right? That's the way I choose to go and describe the options that fandoms have if they're working with a vet office or a mobile vet office that offers flame and water cremation. So let's talk a little bit about the capital cost offset shared by refrigeration. You have a facility, you've got a retort. If you were to add a water system, what changes? Well, you have to refrigerate your pets, right? So that's a shared cost. I'm not inheriting any additional expenses there. Logistics and admin costs are already built in, so that stays the same. Well, all you're doing now is you're marketing green as an upgraded package, right? And if you guys do this, you can increase your sales by about 17% because there is a difference in this process. It takes a little longer. It's all about positioning and marketing. Okay, boutiques, standing alone, small footprint, only studios. You can operate an facility in a very, very small space, right? You don't need a large footprint. I don't have to worry about having a retort stack going out the door and ventilation. Ventilation is important across the board, but you can get away with a smaller space if you chose to go ahead and embark upon alkaline hydrolysis. Things to focus on is you think about how you can twist and adjust your revenue flow. Focus on concierge pickup, 24-hour turnarounds for families. So that would mean if you have more than one vessel, this is a little bit easier to do. Because if you have one vessel, it's a little tougher to give that 24-hour service. But you have the ability of doing the cremation, and then you can sit there and go into dehydration mode if you're operating 24/7. And in theory, a family can go in and have their pets remains, call it a day and a half later. So those are some of the perks associated with it. Upsell, eco-friendly urns, living wreaths, paw-printed jewelry merchandise. But talk about things that are eco-friendly. It could be a bamboo cylinder urn. These are ways you can differentiate from your current model to being one that's a little bit more earth-friendly, okay? Hub and spoke, centralized hub with a mobile transfer van, right? So service vet clinics lacking this type of care on site, right? So you can go ahead and there's software out there that'll help you identify when you have a location that has a submitted form. And I'm sorry, guys, my entire team is in the field and my door is ringing off the hook. I'm sorry about that. It's just Amazon. Who cares about that? All right, next. Pre-planted. Take into consideration a great way for families to have a subscription with you, right? So I call it a forever friend plan. Small monthly fee covers any future pet spread costs and locks in loyalty, right? Bundle of resource and annual memorialization event to increase community stickiness, right? Thinking about ways that people can come in and being a one-stop shop. When a pet passes away, we have to provide a resource to families. That resource could be one, and I think I saw someone in the chat room that provides this type of services to families, right? Grief support should never be underestimated. Um, Talk a little bit about the carbon credit narrative, right? Talk a little bit about what we're doing. Going back to Courtney's graph, we've got the ability to go showcase what output we have with our operation, which is relatively minimal. We've got to run our cycle, but if we're using tankless water heaters versus a tanked water heater, we are consuming less natural resources to warm up that water, which emits emissions, right? We're emitting emissions in one fashion or another, but can we reduce the amount that we're putting out the door? And showcasing the difference between the flaying process and the water process might be that twist you need to go ahead and gain more traction if you were to implement AH. All right, moving on. Let's talk a little bit about ensuring dignity and respect in the process, right? Aesthetics is first and foremost here, but what I love to be able to make sure that we overemphasize with pride is our 4-point ID check, right? Tax, how do we track them? Our documentation associated with it, whether that's the customer getting a notification, whether it's their receipt showcasing their tag number, and how we do a verification with the process. And with verification, I take it a step further. If we are picking up a pet from a family, let's just say from a vet office that currently uses Flame, and you're their customer service, we often ask families, send us a picture so we can do a verification before we leave. Now, we all know that the practices work really hard at doing a great job. We shouldn't be having any problems in this space at all whatsoever. I know I've never run across it, nor do I know anybody that does. But by communicating that to the family, it feels a lot better because they know I don't know who Milo is. And when I do a quick verification, send them a text message saying we have Milo in our care, I close that loop, right? That high touch point, making the solution stickier, right? Or at least our brand stickier to families. Open door policies, allow viewing anytime. I want to be careful about this statement though. I don't mean that we're going to let people into your facility or your cardiologist care center or where you have your retorts. Can't do that. But maybe consider putting in a glass window that can be electronically charged or a curtain, allowing families to look inside your facility. At the very least, it will ensure that we maintain an impeccable looking facility at all times, but allows people to appreciate that we are as sterile as we need to be in our operation. I often do videos if I can, right? With my background here. This is not just a backdrop, this is my facility, so that people can look in and see our operation. Now, let's talk a little bit about the language audit. Never say load, dispose, use the words like care, place, complete. Words will help shape an experience. And the moment of pause, building a 30-second reflection ritual before sealing the vessel. That way, the technicians creates a smoother experience for people, right? That's ultimately what I want to go and convey there. Whether or not you have community ceremonies, hosting an annual candlelight, maybe it's renting a boat and taking families, they have pet remains that they want to scatter in a lake. These are ways to go and reach out to the community, which will help also have people talk about Wheel and Spoke, talk more about the experience they had and what we're doing, and emphasizing the benefit behind this eco-friendly process will help grow your business and bring brand awareness. All right, this wraps up the best practices and solution. I hope I gave you a clear understanding of how to educate our pet owners, navigate the legal and regulatory requirements, and how to have an effective business model that helps ensure your growth. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to drop them in the text, and Donna will relay them in a moment.
Thanks so much, Philip. I apologize that the webinar is being recorded and it stopped somewhere along the line and then it picked back up. So I'm not sure what happened there, but apologize for that interruption. There is a question here from Damien, and he is asking with the bioresponse machines, do these companies say they're doing private cremation or semi-private cremation?
That's That's a great question. I'm going to jump in. So,
Yeah.
what we've uncovered when we've had these roundtable discussions And actually, this is one of the conversations we had at the last IOP, IOAPCC meeting, was where is it regulated? So the state of Illinois, they, in their statutes, there is a call out. So if you have multiple pets in the vessel, you cannot call it a private cremation. I've not run across this in other states where they have this statute spelled out that way. One of the benefits is you are what's left behind. It's like going to the Field Museum and seeing nothing but beautiful bones, right? Courtney had a great screen depicting all the pictures of the bones. That's what's left behind. Bones can't jump from one compartment to another. So the integrity behind the segregation is what's critically important here. But in the state of Illinois, I have to refer to mine as an individual compartment cremation, right? So we need to make sure that the family knows that if it's only one pet in the vessel, that's considered to be private, right? Do I really want to have private cremations? I can do it for families. I limit it to one time per week now, but it's going to be a little bit more expensive because that's a big vessel equipped to sit there and cremate, 27 cats, Shih Tzus or Yorkies, right? Not that I ever had just cats, Shih Tzus, and Yorkies, but that's an example of what happens.
Thank you, Philip. And yes, for IPC, through our accreditation process and best practices and terminology, we do use the term individual for the cremated remains for the process. I'm sorry. So yeah. So great answer. Thank you very much. One, also Damien mentioned Florida. It was on the ballot last year as well in Florida. So definitely a concern. I wanted to mention one quick message also from Bobby Langley. Bobby had mentioned that she started out as a flame-based cremation operation, a facility, and they put in aqua, aquamation, a water cremation, and sorry, I'm trying to find it real quick. So flame based since 2011, and then 2018 added the water cremation. They focused on increasing their percentage of water cremation. They're now at 90% water and 10% flame. So that just shows you kind of a growth in the move that they've kind of moved over to that. So I thought it was very interesting to make sure everyone also knew about that and saw that. And we'll go ahead and turn it over to Matthew now. And then please continue to put your questions in there, and we'll open the floor up in the last few minutes of the seminar.
Hi, everyone. I'm Matthew with Aqua Crossings. We are a aquamation facility here in Phoenix, Arizona, and I'm going to be going over a few popular questions and answers that you might receive either from families or from veterinary hospitals as you are educating folks about this service. So the first one that I have is what are one of the most persistent myths or urban legends about pet water cremation, and what is the best way for dispelling this rumor? So I heard a saying, I think it was the last conference, cremulation is the best kept secret of the cremation industry. And so what most folks tend to believe are that at the end of a fire cremation, a pan gets pulled out full of powder. And so they're very confused how you get a pan of powder at the end of a water cremation system. And so I always explain that at the end of a fire cremation, you're left with a skeleton. Some people's eyes get large, really. It gets cooled, and then that is reduced into a powder using the same process that we use after our skeleton is dried. A lot of times when you make that comparison to kind of what happens with the skeleton post the mechanical part of the cremation, it is very, I always go, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And so I find that to be educating around the cremulation process as a whole, and is one of the most successful ways of educating a family of what's left over at the end of the process. So next question that I have is in terms of what regulatory hurdles have been, maybe the biggest surprise in our region, or what have we done to overcome them? So every market is different. Every municipality is different. Wastewater is probably something that almost everyone will have some form of involvement, whether that be even just simple outreach to your local water treatment facility and they just respond back saying you're good to go, or on the other end of the spectrum, it's absolutely not allowed into the water system due to a lack of education and understanding of what it is. For us, it was actually a biohazardous medical waste transport license through the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. It's a mouthful. But I mean, truly, in order to process sharps for our clinic partners, which is a huge need for our hospitals in our region, we did have to secure that permit. And it was very cumbersome and expensive to be able to do, but it really unlocked a lot of clinic partners for us who are unwilling to leave an existing partner that did offer that service. I will also say, in some uh, parts of the country, pets are seen as as biohazard waste as well. I don't know, I don't have a list of which markets that is applicable for, but we actually did run into that here in Arizona. And so having the permitting for transporting deceased pets is something that the UMA needs to look into as well. So the next question I have is, what role do veterinarians, play in the decision making process, and how can we partner with them? Now, it is very rare that a family is going to say goodbye to their pet at a hospital and in that moment of grief decide to take the body with them to go to a water cremation facility, even if that's what they want. Um, if the vet is partnered with a fire crematorium. That being said, we can offer services to our vet partners where we will come to their hospital and pick the pet up. Essentially, we'd ask them to place the pet on a hold. It's a very common practice where a family's in the room. They don't know if they want a private or a communal. They'll ask for a hold. And the clinic will essentially do that. And then, as an aftercare partner, you can come pick the pet up and do the transport for them. Um, there's also a lot of education that could be done for our veterinary hospital. So here we do a lot of lunch and learns. We bring lunch to the hospital. We go through a presentation. We cover a lot of resources on how to talk to a family going through the goodbye process. Think about a lot of front desks or office managers are like, no, we're good. We don't want to hear about aquamation per se. They do want to have resources for their staff to handle euthanasia appointments better and be able to be more compassionate. So I have found that really leaning into that side of things has been successful. And then, of course, consistent communication. One of my sayings is the squeaky wheel gets grease. And so, just consistently showing up to your vet partners and making sure that, they know you're there to help and assist. And as soon as, it, I will say this too, in our experience, I don't want to say we don't have any, but I think very few hospitals have switched to our service because we are a water cremation provider. The water cremation has got them excited about like, let's hear it out. Let's learn about it. Let's see what it is. It's service that really ends up driving the hospital to switch. My phone is not going off the hook. Hi, we hear you do water cremation. We'd like to, move as quickly as possible to your service. It's more of, oh, interesting. How does that work? We'd like to learn more. And then as they learn more, they're really sold on the service. And then it is a very nice afterthought that, oh, well, you know what? This is a lot gentler on the planet, like to Courtney's graph of how much CO2 is emitted, or this is just a lot, in terms of thinking about where the pet's going after the appointment, they like this more. So that's my response there. So my last question here, mentoring a new operator with the pet cremation industry, what are some must-dos? So I kind of leaning on that, the hospital thing. I mean, building those relationships with veterinary hospitals is huge. Being able to open your doors or offer a service where you already have a hospital that's excited to support you and work with you is big. It's gonna take some work to do that, but I think a lot of that is done through incredible keepsakes. Um, all of us have been in the room with families, when we're unboxing remains. The paw print is what takes them over the edge in terms of that emotional feeling where they're seeing that keepsake, right? And then maybe it's the fur clipping. I mean, and then the remains too. But I mean, most of the times families are so drawn into that keepsake, like a clay paw print or whatever that special, remembrance item may be. I have found that to be a very strong, really lead for clinics to learn about our service and want to learn more when they see nice pieces like that. And also systems, because Shannon mentioned this earlier. As you grow and as more veterinary partners or pet parents are interested in getting using your services, having the right systems in place to scale appropriately is essential. The last thing you want to do is promise the moon and the stars and fall short of that. As we know, there's no doing anything over in our industry. And so making sure that we have those systems in place will really ensure you're coming out of the gate strong and you can help clinics offer this service to families. So those are my questions that I have answers to. And if anybody has any other questions they want to put in the chat, we'd all be happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Matthew. I do have opening the floor up. It looks like Antoine had also asked what the market share estimate is in 5 years. If we want to address that, and then also if everyone could continue just to put your questions in the chat. If someone one of the panelists want to take that, please.
I can't speak to what the percent will be in 5 years, but I can just say, like, I don't know of many, if any, new flame operators opening in my state. Just about every new operator is a water operator, and there's probably been 5 that have opened since we opened our doors about 3 years ago.
Wow.
Flame
Mm.
operators that are new to the space that are coming back and saying, "Hey, we're coming out of the gate. We have no experience in the cremation industry. We're going to start off with fire." There's been one who has been like previously in the fire cremation space and then is coming back, so that's different. But yeah, I would say overall, um, water just seems to be where everything's going.
All right. Thank you, Matthew. Hey, this is a great question and one that I was waiting to come up, and that was from James. We're applying our effluent to farmland. Has anyone found a way to remove the fat and the concerns just with the effluent and what you do with that? So, if the panel wants to just kind of all open up, and then that way you can have a full on discussion. Courtney.
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely a challenge. I think that, when we've tanked in the past, that does that fat or soap does move to the top, especially if you were letting it sit. And so in theory, you could scrape it out. I've had conversations about using a grease trap, and the overall thought with that is it doesn't really work because while it appears like fat, it acts more like soap. And so the grease trap itself is pretty much worthless when it comes to that separation. So I would probably say more tanking it, letting it settle, and then trying to remove that whatever is at that top, that foam or that fat, and removing that. Anyone else?
Okay.
No, I'm with you, Courtney. I'd say let it raise, skim off the top, then drain. I mean, you're still going to have some that settles in the draining process, but the goal is to remove, 98, 99%.
Great. Martin has a question. How many machines does the biggest water cremation business have within their facility? Does any?
Well, I can take a guess. We actually know of a facility in Florida that has just remodeled their business, and they have about 8 or 9 at the moment. I don't know if there's anybody that can top that, but that's Monarch Pet in Florida. And
Yeah, they have 8 or 9. Okay, yeah. Another question from Mia. How important is it that we enforce the use of proper terminology at the clinic level as far as individual versus private? Um, I'll say that's very important. I'll jump in on there on that, and using the correct terminology because it is an industry standard regarding the way that the terminology and what's considered across the industry. But anyone on the panel want to speak to that?
we do a lot of education. I'll jump in. We do a lot of education with our doctors, our mobile euthanizing doctors, and our clinics about that terminology, and making sure that they understand. And with, of course, the caveat that we can be available to have any conversations with pet families that may have concerns. And I will, even for those that come direct to Petrichor, that have questions. I am very open about the fact of the difference between individual and private. We do offer private similar to what Phil had discussed. However, it's very few and far between. And lots of times when they're asking about private, I will share that it is an individual service. And usually there's a reason why they're asking about the differentiation. So I do try to uncover that. And 9 times out of 10, when I've done the explaining of the individual and sort of the hotel room in the hotel, explanation, they're usually comfortable with that. It's usually not that they want it completely private, but if they do, we are able to subscribe or to support
Mm. Very good. Jason has, oh, let's see. The grease usually trapped in the skeleton when there's a bigger pet being processed, making the bones harder to dry. Does anyone have a problem with that? And is there a solution?
I'll jump in. What I do is I spray a mild degreaser on the bones, and or Dawn does a fantastic job. And we just gently rinse with the hose, and that will remove that outer layer griminess, right? Ensuring that the bones will dry faster.
That's a great tip, Philip, what did you call that you spray?
A degreaser. So I'll take a bio degreaser, a degreaser. I even use Dawn. I go over the top, making sure the bones are really clean.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I spray it and let the water soak. Typically let it soak for 2 hours. Then I drain the water, and now I truly have a the essence of just the bones themselves, which, with a fan helps remove a lot of moisture, and then we place them in the proofing cabinets to hydrate. But the goal is get the grime off so it can dry faster, right? It's like a board.
Right.
You
Yeah.
can echo that. Yeah, we absolutely have a number of
Great.
degreasers. Again, being the chemist, I'm trying to figure out which one works best for your water composition, is important. And yes, a degreaser can help tremendously.
Okay, awesome. How is the commingling of liquid different from the commingling in the secondary chamber of flame cremation? This is from Paul.
Yeah, I'll let me jump in quickly on this one. So, Paul, that's a good question. However, the water itself, of course, it's mixed. Let's face it, if my finger is a hair color or fur, right? As water slowly but surely raises, that air in the water is breaking down the chemical bonds that makes hair follicles silky and or coarse, converting it into gray water, right? Or to a liquid. Same thing happens with our entire liner. It's issues. What we care about is just the balance, and families want to make sure that they're receiving the essence of just their pet back. That liquid itself is being returned back to the ecosystem, whether it's directly pumped into the farmland if you're rural, or it's going through the water reclamation area, right? It's making its way back to the ecosystem. What families are getting back is just their pets' bones to get dehydrated in some fashion or form and then processed into a fine powder.
Awesome. Um,
There's no commingling there is my point.
right, right. This is from Laura. We currently operate a flame cremation, but we have concerns switching to water cremation due to the increase in ashes since we do a lot of communal cremation. Any ideas on respectful disposal of ashes when the client does not want to take them home? That's question one. And then there's another question two. How many of you offer the communal cremation as well, through the water cremation?
I'll jump in quickly and take this question and let everybody else jump in. We do communal cremations. Once we get them, once they're converting to a fine powder, we scatter them in the pasture because really by using potassium hydroxide and not using sodium, what you're getting back is a nice sterile fertilizer, right? So this is the essence of what gets scattered in a pasture, and it serves as a fertilizer to help the grass that these forest seeds are grazing on grow. So hopefully that answers both your questions. Anybody else?
Anybody else on the
We
panel?
Yeah, we do communal cremation. We're in California, and so we work with a company that spreads those ashes off sea for families that don't want them. And I did want to address Damon's question about the fat going down the drain. So if you are connected to the sewer system, yes, everything, all the liquid is going down the drain, and that includes any of the fats or soaps or whatever's left behind. we were talking about that fertilizer application or that land application. It is actually really great for the plants. It just tends to be a little greasy, which the microbiome loves, but people find a little off putting sometimes. We're not used to soil being greasy. So that's the reason for separating the fat or the soap after if you're going to land apply.
We also do communal cremations. There's definitely a lower percentage than we thought we would be doing, but we do them, and we, typically spread, that on on our private property, up in the Lakes region in New Hampshire. But as we get larger, we definitely would have to have a different disposal system, and certainly would love to have a boat in Boston to be able to do that out at sea, but we'll see when that time comes.
Mm, awesome. Well, I don't see any other questions that are coming in. If I missed any, I apologize, but I did want to just thank our panelists today for being here and all the work that you put into it and the experience and knowledge that you've shared with everyone. Thank you very much. I think it was very, very educational for everyone. And I do want to just mention a couple of things. One. We do have a certification course in alkaline hydrolysis water cremation that will roll out this summer. We work with Cana, we partner with Cana. We give basically all the information and education, and we put the program together. So we're in a partnership together with Cana, which is the Cremation Association of North America, and our alkaline hydrolysis certification program for pets will roll out this summer. So we're very excited about that. Yourself, as well as your staff, can become certified. And just as a certified pet crematory operator, or would be, but for alkaline hydrolysis, so it's specific to that. Also, I did want to mention that our accreditation program also has accreditation for alkaline hydrolysis water cremation as well. So those are two things that if you want to learn more about, just contact us here at the home office. Also, we have two additional certification programs that are rolling out over the summer as well. Pet bereavement level 1, level 2, and 3 will be available online. So we'll be introducing those as well as some translation into Spanish and French. So we're beginning to do a lot of our new programs are being translated. So I just like to kind of throw that out there. And if you're not a member of the IAPC, please, contact us here at the home office. I'd love to talk to you about becoming a member. One last thing, our conference is in San Antonio this year in September. We will be visiting a Eternal Waters Aquamation facility right outside of Antonio. So you'll get to go on a tour behind the scenes. And we will also be visiting a flame-based operation, Fond Memories, in New Braunfels, Texas. So it's really just a really wonderful, unique opportunity to be able to go, boots on the ground and see a facility behind the scenes in the operations. And you're really just a great opportunity to be able to do that. And the conference itself has got some really great agenda plan, great speakers, roundtables. We're doing TED Talks this year, which is kind of speed learning on everything that you want to know about, hacks and quick ideas for being able to operate your business more efficiently. And last but not least, again, I really appreciate our panelists and the time. Thank you all for being here, for your work and everything that you did to prepare for this. And thank you to the attendees today. Also, this is available to members of IAPC, so the recording and the slides will be placed onto the member portal. So as a member, you can log in and you'll be able to see that and view it again and share it with others within your staff. So just wanted to say thank you again, and I hope everyone has a great rest of the week. Thank you so much, everyone.